My name is Helen Rist, and I'm married to Ant, and we lead Forest Town Church in St Albans in the UK together with an amazing leadership team. And it's my privilege to be able to speak to you today. And I just want to say what an amazing time we've had together. Such inspiring talks, giving us incredible insights and keys as we go away and think about what God has in store for us as church communities. So I thought it'd be great just to tie everything together as we round up our time and to bring you a prophetic encouragement that I thought would really help us spur into all that God has for us. One of the things I really love doing is going for a walk in the farm fields alongside our house. We have a number of barley and wheat fields that grow there. And it's been amazing to see the different ways that those fields transform as the seasons change. And it kind of reminded me a bit of that psalm, the words that Isaiah wrote in Isaiah 28. And he says these things. He says, when a farmer plows for planting, does he plow continually? Does he keep on breaking up and working the soil? When he has leveled the surface, does he not sow caraway and cumin? Does he not plant wheat in its place, and barley in its plot, and spelt in its field? His God instructs him and teaches him the right way. And then in verse 29 it says these wonderful words, all this comes from the Lord Almighty, whose plan is wonderful and whose wisdom is magnificent. And I was just thinking, if God is so faithful to teach a farmer how to farm his crops and to harvest and to see a yield from what he does, how much more will he not give us wisdom and instruct us as we sow seeds and we invest and build in his wonderful church and see that flourish and to come into a wonderful harvest. One of the other Psalms that I love is Psalm 47 verse 4. And there's these very simple words that says, he chose our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loved. God has prepared an inheritance for each and every one of us, both in heaven one day, but also for us here on earth right now. And what we sow here and now affects something of the reward or the wonderful inheritance that we will see it in the harvest at the end of time and also through our lives. When I look at the story of Joseph, I see a man who understood this. And when he is given the dream of Pharaoh, where Pharaoh saw 7 lean cows and 7 fat cows, which represented 7 lean years of drought and 7 years of plenty, Joseph was very astute, and he understood that God had revealed something of the future season so that he could put some things in place then and there to provide for what was coming. And we know that he gathered up all the grain into the silos in Egypt so that eventually when the drought did come, he was able to resource the whole of the Nile Basin and the neighboring kingdoms because he had put into place some things so that he could foresee what was coming in the future season. John 15 verse 15 records the amazing words that Jesus spoke to his disciples in the last days, just before he went to his crucifixion. And he says these amazing words to his disciples. He says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know what his master's business is. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. And you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that whatever you ask in my name, in the name of my Father, I will give you. Amazing promise there. You see, Jesus wants to confide in us. He wants to share something of what his purposes are, what the seasons are that he has prepared for us, what the wonderful inheritance is that he has for us to walk into. God has good plans and He delights to share them with us. About 2 years ago, Anthony and I were on holiday in Portugal, and we were walking along this very beautiful sandy beach, and we were just talking and praying and just asking God to speak to us for our own lives and for the life of our church. And as we were walking along, we saw this beautiful, magnificent yacht moored in the shallows right near the edge of where the breakers were coming into the beach. So close, in fact, you could almost go and walk and touch the boat. And we thought, how strange that this beautiful boat, which was fashioned for the deep waters, was resting there in the shallows. And in that moment, we felt God speak to us about the fact that in some ways, our church had become a church that was sitting in the shallows, sitting in a safe place, and that it had been shaped by God into an ocean-going vessel. And God was saying that we needed to get ready to go out into the deeper waters and no longer stay in the safe shores. And so when we took that word and we went back home and we prayed and talked to our leaders, we started to put some things into place in anticipation of what God was saying was something of the deep waters. And so one of the things that we did was we employed a youth worker. And over the last couple of years, we've seen our youth ministry just grow and double and flourish. And recently, we've been looking at the whole thing of bringing on another elder to part-time placement on our staff who can look at our outreach strategy in terms of working into the nations that we are looking at supporting, and especially into Cambodia and India and Eastern Europe. We are trying to put building blocks in place to anticipate something of the thing that God has spoken as the next season for our church. And so maybe I could ask for each of us, it's good to think, what are the prophetic words that God has spoken and the encouragement that He's brought to your specific context, to your church? Because when we step out into action, that comes out of obedience from hearing God's voice to us, there is a fruitfulness that often goes way beyond what we could expect or imagine, just as Joseph experienced. I think one of the wonderful examples of this also in the New Testament is the heroes of the faith in Hebrews 11. And it starts with these wonderful words, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see. And this is what the ancients were commended for." There were heroes of faith who stepped out in faith and sowed seeds that yielded a harvest way beyond what they could see in the natural. In verse 7 we read about Noah. It says, "By faith Noah, when warned about the things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family." And we also read about Abraham in verse 8, which I'm sure you know well. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, he obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. These fathers were commended for their faith because they knew how to hear God's word, but then they were also, out of complete confidence and trust in His faithfulness, they stepped out and began to walk into their inheritance. And it's really good to ask ourselves, what steps do we need to take now, right now, to see more of our inheritance unfold for us? It takes courageous faith. Of course, there will always be detractors and disappointments along the journey. And I could probably take a long time to share with you some of the things that have been a discouragement or difficulty for us on our journey. And we've had many of those. But one of the things I've found in leading a church is that when difficult things come, they cause us to rely more fully on God and not on ourselves. I think in Galatians, when Paul writes to that church there, he probably saw that they were struggling with similar things. And he says these words in Galatians 6 verse 9. He says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. One of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 126, verses 5 to 6. Those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. What an amazing promise. So I want to end off this time with some questions for you to reflect on as you go into your different contexts. And to just ask these questions: what good plans does God have in store for you? What is His good inheritance for you? And what does that look like in this next season? What are some of the prophetic words that are alluding to and pointing to what that is? And then what seeds of faith in action do you need to sow right now so that you can walk into that future inheritance? Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you.